Hi everyone, thanks for watching. There's been a lot of talk this past week about Trump being politically dead and that his self-inflicted wounds are simply too severe to ever come back from. The prevailing view, both with the media and with most politicians, is that Trump is now toxic and will never again be the political force of nature that he has been these past few years. However, we should remember that we are dealing with the man who, along with Katie Bonner, wrote The Art of the Comeback back in 1997. His entire adult life has been about coming back, even when the odds are greatly stacked against him. He has come back from multiple bankruptcies, multiple failed marriages, multiple scandals during the Republican primary, multiple scandals while president, impeachment, and even COVID-19. Trump created most of these problems for himself, of course, but that isn't the point. Rather, the point is that when he is seemingly knocked down for the count, he doesn't slither away to a dark corner and hide. Instead, he resurrects himself time and time again, spurred on by his well-known thirst for vengeance and with an unworldly ambition fueled by his outsized ego. His losing the election to Joe Biden won't stop him either, but will, in fact, motivate him to seek political payback. I am convinced that he will soon return with a single purpose, which is to destroy all his enemies, both real and imagined. With that in mind, here are the 5 keys to Trump regaining power. Key number 1. The Patriot Party. The GOP is currently on the edge of splitting in two, with pro-Trump and anti-Trump wings of the party at war. Many on the right want Trump gone as soon as possible, believing that he has poisoned conservatism, while the pro-Trump side wants the Trump agenda to be front and center of the GOP moving forward. Trump himself has told people close to him that he is interested in forming a third party and floated the name of the Patriot Party as one possibility. Indeed, just since reports of Trump talking about this, interest in a potential Patriot Party has skyrocketed, with many Trump supporters seeing it as the ideal vehicle for Trump to run again. Third parties have, of course, traditionally struggled in this country, but Trump has the ability to, almost overnight, make any third party a powerful entity, one that would shock D.C. and also leave the GOP in shambles. The Patriot Party, or as some have suggested, a MAGA party, with Trump as its leader, would siphon off huge numbers of Republican voters, along with substantial grassroots funding that was so essential to him in 2016. There is a feeling among many leading Republicans that Trump's threat of a third party is simply a bluff, and that in reality he simply wants to seek payback against anyone in the GOP he considers to have been disloyal. In fact, in recent days, Trump himself has seemed to be less interested in starting a third party than in intimidating Senate Republicans into not impeaching him. But whether or not Trump does indeed start a Patriot Party, or as more and more Republicans are starting to believe, is simply intimidating the GOP to purge the anti-Trumpers, the threat of a third party is an extremely powerful tool that Trump will use for his comeback. Coincidentally, the only president to ever have served 2 non-consecutive terms, Grover Cleveland, was also helped by a third party back in 1892. Back then, the so-called Populist Party took 8% of the vote, allowing Cleveland to beat Benjamin Harrison by a margin of 277 to 145 in the Electoral College. You know what they say about history repeating itself. One last thing, a few days ago there was a story about a man named Kevin Strong who took part in the January 6th storming of the Capitol. Strong, a large man of approximately 6'7", and who was already under investigation by the FBI, is an FAA employee and is a believer in QAnon. According to the FBI affidavit, Strong told FBI agents that he believed a new one-party system called the Patriot Party was coming. I mention this story because sometimes we see little clues in the media about what's coming down the pike, and the Patriot Party seems to be one of those things about to rear its ugly head in some form. And a so-called one-party system would certainly be something that we will see when the Antichrist reaches full power during the final 3.5 years of his reign. Key number 2, the stolen election. Several recent polls have shown more than 70% of Republicans believe that Trump actually won the November election election. These people, and Republicans more generally, not only consider the election as having been stolen, but they now view Trump as a martyr, one who suffered greatly for the good of the nation. This, in turn, engenders sympathy and deepens their loyalty to Trump, especially in light of other leading Republicans now turning their backs on him. Personally, I don't believe the election was stolen, as I've seen the so-called evidence for such a case, and it simply doesn't hold up. But it's not relevant whether you or I believe that the election was stolen from Trump. Rather, the point is that nearly half of this country does believe that Trump is the rightful president, and they are extremely angry about him not being in the White House. When you toss in the coming impeachment trial in the Senate, you'll end up with tens of millions of Americans who are not only outraged that their president continues to be attacked, but they pine for the day when he can get political payback and return to power. And this anger is visceral, not logical, which exposes millions of Americans to being even more susceptible to Trump's continued lies and to the various false pronouncements of groups like QAnon, the Epoch Times, and others. Trump's ability to make a strong emotional or visceral connection to his supporters cannot be overstated. His supporters often talk about how great Trump makes them feel, which is the basis for their affection for him. Trump himself recognized the power he seems to have over his supporters when early on he said he could shoot someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue and not lose any votes. That was true then, and it's true now. Just like Trump will use the threat of a third party to purify the GOP, he will also continue to talk about how this election was stolen from him in the coming months. This will continue to rally his base around him and ensure that tens of millions of Americans will remain emotionally invested and loyal to him no matter what happens next. Remember, the power of Trump lies in his ability to reach people on an emotional or gut level. And Trump has tens of millions of Americans who feel in their gut that he is their president, and he has the power to call on these people at any moment he wishes to take whatever action he chooses. So many Trump supporters who are at the January 6th insurrection have publicly said they were only there because Trump asked them to be. If that isn't a demonstration of Trump's power over his base, what is? Key number 3, the power play. Amazingly, Trump's losing the election is actually enabling him to solidify his power in the GOP. Thanks to those Republicans publicly speaking out against him after the January 6th chaos at the Capitol, Trump and his supporters now know who his enemies are and who needs to be targeted. Trump has discussed the prospect of supporting primary challengers and campaigning against elected Republicans who he feels were insufficiently loyal to him during his failed crusade to overturn the 2020 presidential election. Reports are that Trump currently has more than $70 million in campaign cash banked to fund his efforts to seek political payback. Trump has also instructed his aides to prepare election challenges to lawmakers who crossed him in the final weeks of office, including Liz Cheney, Brian Kemp, Lisa Murkowski, Tom Rice, and several others. Additional names will undoubtedly be added depending on who else might vote to impeach him in the Senate or publicly support such a move. And if you're unsure about the power that Trump still maintains nationally over the Republican Party, we need to look no further than Oregon. This past Monday, the Oregon Republican Party issued a formal condemnation of the 10 House Republicans who voted in favor of impeaching Trump for his role in inciting the violent insurrection at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. Their statement compared these 10 Republicans to Benedict Arnold before claiming, and I quote, that the violence at the Capitol was a false flag operation designed to discredit President Trump, his supporters, and all conservative Republicans. This provided the sham motivation to impeach President Trump in order to advance the Democratic goal of seizing total power. They finished their statement by comparing the actions of those 10 House Republicans as being equivalent to the events leading up to Hitler's rise to power. If that doesn't convince you that the GOP will do whatever Trump wants, I don't know what will. Key number 4, the Biden backlash. President Biden is facing several daunting challenges during his first few months in office. Problems ranging from a pandemic that seems to be worsening to millions of Americans struggling in an economy ravaged by COVID. He also has to deal with a nation that is remarkably divided, with almost no hope of bringing the two sides together. Other problems include rising tensions with numerous nations around the world, domestic protests about police reform, immigration issues, and out-of-control budget deficits which threaten to implode the U.S. economy. Adding to these extraordinary problems, Biden, despite campaigning as a centrist, wasted no time in enacting a number of very liberal policies through executive order, ranging from rejoining the Paris climate deal to immigration issues to reversing Trump's ban on transgender people serving in the military, to many others. These liberal policies, whether you agree with them or not, deepen the division between right and left America, making it all the more impossible to bridge the divide in this country. Biden is set up to fail. Any president taking over in 2021 would be set up to fail. There are simply too many problems, both domestically and abroad. There are too many divisions and wounds to heal. There are too many issues all coming to a head at one time, and there is simply too much hatred that each side has for the other. And as much as we hope it doesn't happen, imagine all of these problems facing the Biden administration, made even worse by a large-scale terrorist attack, whether it's foreign or domestic. We are very much overdue for one, and personally, I believe that Iran is looking to target New York City, but I'll cover that more in a future video. The Biden backlash will, in large part, be fueled by the fact that America often takes dramatic swings politically from one side to the other, much like a pendulum. A couple of years of what many will see as a radically liberal Biden administration will only reignite the desire for a tough, no-nonsense, law and order type to take over as soon as possible. And guess who will be waiting in the wings? Key number 5, the conquering hero. In the eyes of nearly one half of this country, Trump will be their knight in shining armor, riding in to rescue America from the horrors of the Biden administration. To them, Trump alone can restore the United States and save it from the liberal agenda. At the heart of this yearning for Trump to regain power is an innate desire in many Americans to have a strongman type of leader, an authoritarian political leader who will have the power to get whatever he wants for the good of the nation, of course. And they see Donald J. Trump as being such a strong, authoritarian figure, one who will lead America back to greatness. In reality, Trump's second term will make his first term look like it was run by Mother Teresa. His vindictiveness will consume him as he seeks vengeance against anyone and everyone who he has perceived as being disloyal. Rather than being the benevolent king who rescues America from the liberals, Trump will plunge America into tribulation. It's just a matter of when he will do this. There has been much speculation about Trump returning in 2024, and that option will certainly be there for him if he chooses it. But we mustn't discount what happened on January 6th as possibly being a microcosm of what is to happen in the next couple of years. There is still a great deal of anger on the far right and among Trump supporters, and they simply may not want to wait for 4 years to remove the Biden administration. As I mentioned in my last video, I mistakenly believed that Trump would win the 2020 election in order to continue to grow as the antichrist. Well, I've certainly learned my lesson to not predict exactly what road will Trump now go down, but all I will say for now is that Trump will return. Perhaps he does wait until 2024 to stage his comeback, or perhaps a few shocking events take place before that time, ones that restore him to power. For all we know, he might take a brief hiatus to Israel before returning as the conquering hero in the eyes of many. I'm not going to predict exactly what road Trump will now take to regain power, as I simply don't know. But his political wound will be healed. In fact, is being healed right now, this very moment. And when it's fully healed, he will be back on the scene, hell-bent on seeking vengeance and gaining more and more power. Don't take your eyes off of Trump. He is as a snake in the grass, simply awaiting his opportunity to strike back at all his enemies. And he will, because Donald J. Trump is the Antichrist. That's all for today. Thanks for watching, and if you care to leave a comment, please do. As always, please be respectful of one another. Take care.